Welcome to Trout Talk right here on News Talk Saga 960 AM. Mike Karafilidis along with Brendan Lang. We are broadcasters of the Mississauga Steelheads. Of course, we're missing our one amigo who's on assignment. He's up in a helicopter, it's doing some stuff, whatever. So Zach Bodesi is not with us. Brendan, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, Mikey. We got some news we're going to talk about here in a moment, but it's going to be a little bit weird. We're not going to have any hockey over this upcoming weekend, for me at least. You're going to have some hockey up north with the Steelheads. We're not going to be around the rink, but everything's going well. Had a good past weekend. Been getting into the simulator, golf simulator, quite a bit here recently. Getting the swing ready. We're about a month and a half, 2 months maybe away from getting outdoors. So looking forward to that. But it's been kind of the same old for me around these past few weeks.
Fantastic football. Watched that on the weekend.
Yes.
Saw an upset. I don't know if it really was an upset. Kansas City beat Baltimore, but San Fran, man, they beat Detroit. I really wanted the Lions to move in, and good news on the Steelheads part, of course, winning on Sunday against the Brantford Bulldogs. Big win, and picking up a point against the Flint Firebirds. All right, let's get to our news, our big news. Probably everybody knows this. It's been speculation right now, but it is for sure now. The Steelheads, Mississauga Steelheads, will be the Brampton Steelheads next year. The official press release was released earlier this week. Brendan Lang, we'll read that to you right now.
Here it is. The Mississauga Steelheads are excited to announce a significant development in our team's history. After careful consideration and extensive discussions, we are in the process of conducting the necessary due diligence to relocate our team to Brampton for the 2024-2025 Ontario Hockey League season. This move marks a strategic decision aimed at enhancing our team's growth and expanding our fan base. Brampton's vibrant, diverse community and its growing hockey fan base present a thrilling new chapter for the Steelheads, offering our players, staff, and fans a fresh and dynamic environment. We're currently working closely with all stakeholders to ensure a smooth transition and with the OHL, as any relocation is subject to the approval of the OHL Board of Governors. Our commitment to our fans and partners remains unwavering during this transition period. We are incredibly grateful for their support and loyalty shown by the Mississauga community over the years and aim to maintain strong ties with the city.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start off. First of all, let's let everybody know, and I put out a tweet on this, that we are broadcasting the games for the Brampton Steelheads. Let's first put that out there. We are a fantastic broadcast group. We'll be back again, and we will be broadcasting Brampton. So let's just get that out of the way. We're back, and we're excited about it. I'm excited about this move. I'll start off with it first. It's going to be tough to leave Mississauga, of course. Don't get me wrong. Lots of good people, good fans, good memories. It's tough. It's a tough move, but business is business, I guess, as they say. Going to be down the road in Brampton. It's a fresh new start. Yes, it didn't work out before with the Brampton Battalion, right? They moved to North Bay, but why can't it work? Tell me, why can't it work right now with the Mississauga Steelheads? Now going to be the Brampton Steelheads. I think it can. My opinion, I think it can. Why not? You know me, Brendan. I'm a positive guy. Always.
Yes.
Absolutely always. Mayor over there is Patrick Brown. Big hockey fan. Already, he is tweeting stuff out like crazy. He is excited about this. The support is there. Are the fans going to come and support this team, Brendan?
That's the big question. And I think it's time will tell when we're going to see coming up here. And I think, it's when it's new, I think you're going to start to see fans pouring in. And I think that that's kind of the time that you need to be able to sort of capture the fan base, because when Brampton, I don't know the exact amount of years. What is it, 10 years since they moved to North Bay? Something around that time frame. They haven't had hockey in Brampton for that time. So it's new. It's exciting. They're back in there. When you start getting fans in the building here to start the year, that's going to be the time to sort of, again, capture the audience. So looking forward to that. And you kind of hit the nail on the head there, all the talking points about the Steelheads moving from Mississauga to Brampton. Yeah, it is a little bit sad. Mississauga has been in the OHL for, again, I don't know the exact amount of years, but it seems like it's been for a long time, over 20 years. Mississauga's had a team. You had the Ice Dogs. They end up going to Niagara, but then the Mississauga Majors come in, and then the Steelheads. So it's been a tradition in the city of Mississauga to have junior hockey year. So definitely sad to see that move on. But again, I mean, it's all about, things in life change and they come and go. So got to be, like you said, always positive, moving forward to the next thing. And they're going to finish out the year in Mississauga. We're not going anywhere yet.
Yeah, we're not going anywhere yet.
Yes,
everybody.
yes.
Let's
right.
reiterate. We're not. We still have this year. We're just talking about next year.
Yes.
Just getting down to the points. And our broadcast team is not going anywhere either. So don't worry.
Yes. Yeah, so we're still going to be in Mississauga for the rest of the year. Hopefully a good playoff run to kind of send off Mississauga. And then, I mean, we've talked about it so many times on this show, but this team looking really good for the future. And that always helps when you're trying to draw fans in, when you have a good team. And by all signs, all accounts, it's going to be a very good team for the first few years that they're going to be in Brampton. So yeah, definitely going to be a change, but I think I'm looking forward to it. And I think a lot of people are.
Yeah, I know our broadcast team is really, really looking forward to it. It's a change for us. It's going to be a change for everybody. Just like in the email when it said, it's a change and trying to get the hockey back up and whatnot. I think this marketing team for the Steelheads is going to do a great job of marketing.
Good point.
In Brampton. They've done a fantastic job already with the Steelheads right now. So, now it expands to the communities, of course. You've got your mill, they want to expand to Caledon, get those people out there, whatnot around the area. I like this move. I really do. I think it's going to work. I think for all the pessimists out there that think it's going to stink, guess what? I'm telling you right now, it's going to work. You heard it here.
Hey, there's the optimism from Mikey K. He always has it. Always has it.
All right. So, you know what? When we come back, we're going to have our special guest, the Athletics, Scott Wheeler, who does an awesome job. I know. Can't wait. And he'll be coming up next right here on Trout Talk, News Talk Saga 960 AM when we come back. All right. Welcome back to Trout Talk right here on News Talk Saga 960 AM. Mike Karafilidis along with Brendan Lang. We are Steelheads broadcasters. We are missing one of the fabulous trio as our Jack Bonestein is on assignment right now, and he actually sent us a picture of a helicopter. So I'm not sure if he's going up the helicopter, how he's going to survive up there. But anyway, all right, so let's welcome in our guest working for The Athletic, and he does all sorts of draft coverage, and he was at the CHL Top Prospects game. Scott Wheeler, my man, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, fellas. It's, as you mentioned, coming off the Top Prospects game for the CHL, the USHL, the World Juniors, so been a busy month or so here dating back to Christmas, and excited to finally be home and have some downtime over the next few weeks. I don't have any travel in February, so February is going to be a nice, hopefully, fingers crossed, quiet month for me.
Yeah, that's good, Scott. I mean, I was following you and all sorts of you're in Sweden, you're here, you're over there. My goodness, and with your family. It's nice to come back to the family, huh?
Yeah, I've got 2 young kids at home, so having to kiss them goodbye on Christmas morning isn't fun. We kind of did the gifts on Christmas morning this year, and then Dad was hopping in a taxi cab to the airport at about 10-11 a.m. on Christmas morning. So it's been I'm actually looking forward to Ottawa next year because I'll fly out on Boxing Day instead of having to leave on Christmas to get over to Europe. So there's always a little bit of added family time when the tournament's in North America and all of that. But the travel's part of it. My son's he's almost 3 now, and he's starting to really get into hockey. So he loves to sort of pick my brain about hockey and ask me about flying in airplanes and all of that fun stuff that comes with the job. So there's some free entertainment for him in terms of chatting me up when I get home from trips and asking me whether I've seen Austin Matthews or William Nylander. So he's a pretty cute kid.
That's awesome. 3 years old. My goodness. Wow. That's amazing. 3 years old, already picking your brain about hockey. You better sign this guy up or something, Scott. I mean,
he's we've had him on skates. We've had him on skates a few times this winter. He sort of Santa brought him skates and a helmet and gloves and a stick, the whole deal. So we've had him out, and he's already obsessed. Every time the Leafs game's on, he's got his stick in his hands and he's singing the national anthems and the whole bit. So we actually brought him to a Marlies game, for his first sort of game as well a couple of months ago, and he loved getting down to Rico, or I guess it's Coca-Cola Coliseum now, to catch the Marlies, and had a ton of fun with the Zamboni and the mascot and all that. So Yeah, he loves it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's that's awesome to hear. So
Awesome.
you'd mentioned the World Juniors next year. I do want to ask you a question about that a little later on, but first, you're talking about the travel, and we just had the top prospects game here recently in Moncton. 2 Mississauga Steelheads there, Luke Misa and Ryerson Leanders. I guess we can start with Leanders because we were just talking about him before we went to break here. But what did you see from him in that game, and also just kind of his sort of stock as it moves towards the draft this upcoming one?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously just released my midseason top 64 at the Athletic, and he wasn't in the top 64, but he was one of the 3-4 goalies who were sort of listed in the honorable mentions for it, which sort of indicates that I view him kind of as a third-round pick. I wouldn't be shocked if a team picks him in the second round. I think there are actually pretty decent odds. He's one of 2 or 3 goalies picked in the second round in this year's draft. There isn't a true star goalie prospect in this year's draft. There isn't a Spencer Knight or a Jesper Wallstedt or a Sebastian Kosa, Yaroslav Askarov, some of those sort of premium talents that we've seen picked at the top of some of the more recent drafts, if you will. But he's a very good sort of B+ goalie prospect. One of obviously the best sort of young goalies in the OHL this year. Both him and Ivankovic both, which I think will be interesting just in talking to their agents and talking to people around them. I almost wonder whether there's push comes to shove there eventually, with one of them wanting more ice time and less of a tandem, and potentially a move that becomes necessary to sort of please both of them because they're both so talented. Jack, I think, is a tremendous goalie prospect. But Ryerson, in terms of the game, Ryerson played really well. Really all 4 of the goalies. It's not typical that we see 4 decent goalies at the CHL top prospects game. You typically have sort of 4 goalies who are invited. They all play, but only 2 of them are sort of legit prospects with prospects of getting drafted in the middle rounds of the NHL draft kind of thing. This year, I think all 4 of those goalies that we saw play are going to get picked. Certainly Ryerson and Carter George, the 2 OHL kids, have an opportunity to be picked sort of early in terms of second, third, fourth round kind of thing. And I thought Ryerson stood up to the task. Some big stretch saves, showed some athleticism, sort of with some important pad saves, stretching out and sort of going post to post to make some lateral saves on passes. I thought he was impressive. So, and that's really how the game played out. It was a tighter game in terms of scoring than we typically see at the CHL top prospects game. And I think a lot of that had to do with stronger goaltending than usual, Ryerson being a big part of that. And also this draft just being stronger in terms of CHL content. This draft is stronger on defense than it is at forward, especially without a player like Caden Lindstrom, who had to miss the game with a hand injury. So a little bit more watered down at forward, some strong D, some strong goaltenders, and as a result, you had a pretty low scoring game. So I actually think that's good. It's nice when the game's competitive, when there's an empty netter to seal it. That means the game's been tight. Sometimes these games can kind of get out of hand and everybody starts having a little bit too much fun out there kind of thing. So it was nice to see a competitive game, and it was nice to see all 4 goalies really rise to the challenge.
Yeah, it was definitely a goaltending defensive battle. Yeah, there wasn't much offense at all, as you said, Scott. But Luke Misa, your thoughts on Luke Misa, seeing him at the top prospect game? Where do you have him in your draft board?
Yeah, Luke's a sort of second rounder, maybe even an early second rounder for me. I feel like just in talking to scouts and the sense I have from people around the league that I'm maybe a little bit higher on him than the consensus. I think there are some teams that view him kind of as a third round guy, others that view him sort of as an early second round guy like I do. He'll probably go somewhere in between. If I had to handicap it at this stage in the draft process, I'd probably guess that he goes sort of late second round. But the skating is the skating. It's a huge asset. He's one of the better skaters in this draft. Very light, sort of fluid, mobile player. The question coming into this year, and I think the question that he has answered and that he had to answer this year was, could he get to the inside more? Could he use his skating to attack the middle third, to create entries through the middle third of the ice, to get better looks for himself as a shooter rather than just sort of using the skating to get out wide and play make. He's got good feel on the puck, good vision, but it's been nice this year to see him go to the front of the net a little bit more, go to the slot, to sort of create in high danger areas for himself, be a little bit more selfish at times, instead of always deferring or always kicking pucks out, that kind of a thing. I've been out to Mississauga to watch him a few times, saw him at the top prospects game. He's impressed me this year. It's tough, always tough as sort of a 5'10", 5'11" natural center, especially when your numbers, obviously his numbers are very good. He leads the Steelheads in scoring. He's one of the more productive draft eligible players in the OHL, but his numbers don't leap off the page in terms of he's not going to have 100-point draft year. That was never going to be in the cards for him. So then scouts, I think, naturally start to ask, okay, what does that look like? If he has an 80-point season, what does that project like moving forward? Can he be a center at 5'10"? Is he going to be a winger at the pro level? All of those questions are questions that he's going to have to continue to answer over the next couple of years. He's not a kid who's going to jump into the NHL or steal a job out of camp next year after he gets drafted. He's going to be back in Mississauga, and he's going to have to sort of continue to put it together. He's then likely going to have to get signed and be the type of player who plays in the AHL for a bit and proves himself in the AHL. I don't think he has enough cachet to be a straight into the NHL type player out of junior. But still, he's one of the better forwards in the OHL. I expect that's only going to continue to improve for him. He's only going to find another gear. And then the skating should be a difference maker, should always be a difference maker for him, really. So how far can that carry him? We'll see. Is he a very good AHLer, or is he a legit sort of top 9 player in the NHL? That's what he's going to have to prove over the next couple of years.
And on the point of Luke Mason, you just talked about the position a little bit, and we've talked with James Richmond about this, but just talking to scouts and kind of around the league, does it seem like he's going to be more moved to the wing in the pro level, or will he, because he is playing wing right now with Mississauga, started out as a center, you mentioned being a natural center, like where does that look like position-wise moving forward?
I think he's most likely at wing. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up in the AHL and they experiment with him at both. He's a player who naturally, because of the skating, and we see this all the time with players who are moved to the wing because they're smaller and then are ultimately moved back to center because of their skating. With his skating, you want him low in the offensive zone. You want him picking up pucks early. You want him using his feet to create zone exits and entries and carry through the neutral zone. That's important for him. So you're more likely to get those touches at the goal line and be able to really wind up and skate if you are at center. In saying that, though, I mean, it's first guy back at pretty much any pro level now, and the positions are pretty fluid after the faceoffs. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. With his skating on the wing, he gets a little bit more freedom to sort of cheat up ice earlier and flee the zone every once in a while and that kind of a thing. So it'll be interesting. I would guess that he's probably a winger at the next level, but it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, we saw a similar story play out with Brad Lambert, who was a late first-round pick of the Winnipeg Jets this year. Right. Brad played center all the way up. Then suddenly everybody decided he was going to be a winger. Then he really struggled on the wing in the AHL last year. They moved him back to center this year, and suddenly, with his skating ability, Brad's a very high-end skater, a lot like Luke is. Suddenly, with Brad's skating ability at the center ice position, he's more involved. He's getting more touches. He's getting pucks low. He's a better exit player and transition player because he's getting pucks low. So we'll see. I wouldn't stamp it anyway, but I think you can probably at least pencil him in for a move to the wing and sort of a strong look at the wing once he's playing in the pro game.
Scott, so there's one of 7 Steelheads that are on this draft board right now. Mason Zabeski, Jakob Fibiger, Finn Harding. My goodness, the list goes on and on. Who am I missing, Brendan? I'm missing everybody. Finn Harding, Mason Zabeski.
Harding's an interesting one.
Yeah.
So, so of all the draft prospects, draft eligibles that are going to be in this NHL draft, give me your thoughts on who could be a steal for a team out of all the draft eligibles for the Steelheads right now.
Yeah, I mean,
which there's a lot.
Yeah, there are. If I mean, not to go back to Luke when we want to touch, I'm sure you guys want to touch on those other names, but if Luke's available in the 3rd, 4th round, suddenly I think there's some real value there. Jacob's an interesting one. I know there are teams that really quite like Jacob as sort of a potential 3rd pairing defenseman someday kind of thing, if all goes well for him. I haven't necessarily seen what some NHL teams have seen in Jacob. I think there are teams that will consider taking Jacob in the 2nd or 3rd round. And whenever I've watched him, I've sort of felt like he's more of a late round pick to me. That's kind of how I feel about the bulk of the rest of that group after Luke and obviously Ryerson, who I think are going to be almost certainly the first two of that group picked. Jacob's interesting. Finn's a really interesting one because just because of the makeup of that lineup and the role that he's had to play, you've really seen some defensive value, I think, out of Finn this year, especially as the season has gone on. His underlying numbers in terms of some of the track data that's available publicly, even some of the data that's made available through Instat, in terms of goal differential, shot differential, he gets really high marks in sort of the results that have happened on the ice when he's been out there. I believe he's got a really, really, not to read too much into plus minus because I don't think it's the bee's knees, but I believe his goal differential and his plus minus are really impressive. So Finn's an interesting one just because it's hard when you don't show a ton of offense. Certainly he can pass the puck and manage the puck and all of that. He's not some kid who slaps it around out there, but he's not going to break you down with the puck on his stick. It has been nice to see Finn sort of jump up. I think he scored 5 or 6 goals now this season. It's been nice to see him sort of try to jump up and involve himself in the play more. I do think there's some more there with Finn. But it's going to be interesting to see whether all of those guys get picked, how many of them get picked, what rounds. I anticipate that because there are so many playing all on the same team that you're going to see a lot of variance in terms of how scouts view them. It's easy when there's only one draft eligible defenseman on a team in particular to hone in on that guy. With this Steelheads team, suddenly you've got 2 or 3 players of interest. They're all playing different roles. I think there are scouts who will think, oh, that guy should be playing ahead of that guy, but the coaching staff maybe views it a little bit differently. And all of that sort of comes into play with a roster that's tightly age gapped, like this Steelheads team is, where they're all within a couple of sort of age groups of each other. And they're really building around that core nucleus of really this 2005 age group or 2006 age group. So it's going to be, I think it'll be interesting because not all of them are going to get picked. I think the majority of them will. I like Finn. I like Jacob. I obviously like Luke and Ryerson. Those are sort of the 4 that I've gravitated to, if you will.
I just want to. Sorry, Brendan. I just want to ask you about Mason Zabesky.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, Mason. I mean, just from my notes, in terms of if I were to pull them up here and sort of rattle them off for you, Mason's a kid who I think gets it in terms of the work rate, getting after it, finishing checks, goes to the net, rebounds. Like that's become a bit of his identity in this group. I do think he can. I mean, he's got a natural shot, sort of a natural shooter's release. He can get it off quickly. I would like to see him show a little bit more. I don't know whether it's creativity. He's never going to be that type of player, but I'd like to see him show a little bit more awareness in terms of on the puck, using his line mates a little bit better. I find he can tunnel vision on the ice. But there's an interesting player there, and I think you're going to see him next year in particular, and maybe especially the year after. You're going to see him come into his own as he sort of developed in the league. I think you're going to see him score 30 goals in the OHL, for example, at some point here, 30 to 35 goals kind of thing. I think that's a realistic expectation for him next year. I think you'll see him get closer. I believe he's at like half a point per game this year. I think you'll see him be sort of more of a point per game player next year and sort of push moving forward here. They've got an interesting sort of group to work with, and that's obviously without getting into the guys, the true top guys for next year in terms of Porter and Jack. And I kind of hinted at it, but I'm a big fan of Ivankovic. I think he's got it all. My understanding is his dad is much taller than him too, so I think there's some size. There's some size to come there. I think teams are really excited about that because he's a little on the smaller side right now for a goalie, but I think teams are hopefully he's going to get a couple of inches here over the next year or two, which will be big for him. Porter's obviously a fabulous player, sort of a modern power forward type on the wing. So teams love Porter, but it's an interesting group. They've got a good young sort of nucleus to build around. And I think they've surprised some people this year with how competitive they've been as well.
And we're talking a lot about the players that are going to be in this upcoming draft, but I want to talk about a guy who was drafted last year, an Angus McDonnell, 5th round pick by the Dallas Stars. So how have you seen that development now coming from his draft year and into his sort of year after he was picked in the NHL?
Yeah, Angus is a player who I like watching. I don't think opposing teams particularly enjoy playing against him. He was, I believe, I do a top 100 in advance of every draft. That's my final draft board, top 100 plus honorable mentions. And I actually think he was, I'd have to go back and look at my list for last year. He was, if not 100th, then he was 99th, and sort of snuck onto my list. And I had a couple of people reach out from around the OHL and said he hasn't been in the top 100 range for a lot of people, but that's a sort of, you're not going to dislike that ranking long term. He's going to take a step here, and he's got a real chance to be a fourth liner at the next level kind of thing. And that's just his identity. He's a pesky, scrappy, hardworking, physical, likes to run his mouth here and there kind of player. Like that's just the kind of kid that he is. He likes to stir the drink. He likes to energize his lines. He finishes all of his hits. He gets after it on the forecheck. I'm not sure there's enough skill to become the fourth line NHLer that I'm sure the Stars are hoping he'll become in the end. But he's going to have a good pro career. Like he's the kind of kid who, if it's not in the NHL or AHL, you'll see him over in Europe as just a good role player on a good professional team. Like he's got that making of a sort of bottom six pro checker type who can sort of get after it. And I think the big issue is that because of his game, you'd like him, because of that style of game, you'd maybe like him to just be a little bit bigger. It's hard to continue to be that style of player once you go up levels. We often see the smaller sort of pesky types from junior hockey don't tend to continue to play that game. They have to pull back in the NHL just because they know if they push the wrong button that the consequences are a little harsher against bigger competition. So he's going to have to continue to try and play that game against bigger competition if and when he gets a potential contract, whether that's an AHL deal or an entry-level contract with the Stars. But I think he's going to give it a real go here. I do think there is some offense there. I know nobody typically if you're hovering around a point per game, it can be tough in your post-draft year to translate that. Not a lot of guys who are about a point per game in their post-draft season go on to play in the NHL. But with the way he plays, coaches are always going to have a use for him. Coaches are always, I think, going to like him. His teammates obviously appreciate him. That's a big part of his identity as a hockey player, and I think it's going to continue to be. So he's an interesting one. I've really enjoyed over the last couple of years, including when I think he surprised some people with some strong play on a poor team at U18 Worlds in Switzerland in the spring. I was in Switzerland for that tournament, and when guys like Tanner Howe and some of their bigger names, if you will, weren't clicking, there was Angus sliding between two talented wingers higher in the lineup to give them a push, right? So that's kind of who he is.
The leader. He's just a leader out there. Always has been.
Yeah.
I mean, what we see for the Steelheads. But all right, so wow, great analysis, Scott, so far. But last question from me, what I want to ask you. Now, you came to watch some Steelheads games this season. You know, we ran into each other, whatnot. But what do you project from this Steelheads team? How much damage do you think they could do in these OHL playoffs? If they make the playoffs, knock on wood, hopefully they do. But if they make the playoffs, do you think they can, upset some teams?
I think if not upset some teams, I think you're going to see really competitive series. They're not a team, I don't think, that's going to bend over and sort of pack it in or go out without a fight. I think they'll play a competitive series. I think they're going to get better as this season progresses, just because of their age, because they're on the younger side in terms of a potential playoff team. I think there's a little upside that we're still going to see develop here. Porter's going to get better. All of these guys are going to sort of find their niche. Those young D that we talked about are going to fit into their roles a little bit better with each passing month, ideally, right? That's what you hope for. And then between Jack and Ryerson, even if one goalie isn't going, they've got a tandem that I'm sure they feel they can trust and rely upon. They're not going to be an easy out. They might get better goaltending than the opposing team in a series. That can always make things interesting. I don't think this is a team that's going to the conference final, for example, but could they win a round? Could they play a 7-game series as a lower seed in the first round and make things interesting? Absolutely. I think that's what they have to build towards. And then next year you bring everybody back and you've got a real opportunity next year to be a competitive team.
And last thing from me, you'd mentioned his name a lot in Porter Martone. Obviously, he's not available for this upcoming draft, but the one after. And you talked about the World Juniors, and there was a lot of talk about maybe they didn't have as much skill, or they could have brought more skill to the team this year. Is there a chance that we see Martone on the World Junior team next year?
I think there's a chance. I wouldn't say it's more likely that he's on the team. I think it's probably more likely he's not on the team. Just in building a mock-up for next year's roster is going to be really strong. When I put together the sort of my idea of the forwards that were going to be in the mix for next year's team after this year's tournament ended, it looked really like there were 6 or 7 lines deep at forward and only 4 lines that are going to make it, kind of thing. So there's going to be 2 or 3 lines of legit forwards, including Porter, who are going to be cut from that team. I'm talking first, second round picks who aren't going to be on that team, right? So it's going to be a much better team than the team that was disappointing at this year's tournament. It's going to be a deeper team at forward. And then you add in that it's his draft year and it's always tough. Now, in saying that, he has tools that the rest of that group doesn't necessarily have. He's got some size and length, obviously. I would imagine that after another summer in the gym, you're going to see him look more like a man next year. They like those certain types, right? They like the guys, the rangy, bigger, stronger, sort of along the wall players for their bottom 6. There's always a ton of 5'10", 5'11" skill guys who are eligible to make Team Canada, and they never build a roster of 12 of those guys, much to the disappointment of people online, I think. So that's the void. If Porter's going to get into that roster, he's going to have to prove that he can play that role. He's going to have to show the Hockey Canada brass next fall that he's capable of being a potential penalty killer, that he's capable of being a forechecker and a checking type, because he's not going to be a top 6. Like, it's just not in the cards for him next year. He's not going to be a top 6 guy as draft eligible on that team. It's very rare, obviously, for that to happen unless you're a Macklin Celebrini or a Connor Bedard kind of thing. Even Misa's brother, who's obviously an exceptional status player, I think is going to be tough to make that team in their draft year next year. So it's that part of it, I think, is interesting. Will he be invited to selection camp? Yeah, I think that he'll be in the mix to be invited to selection camp. I think he's really going to have to show well at next fall and potentially at selection camp to force someone's hand, though, because he won't be a lock to make that team.
All right, Scott. My goodness. Well, great analysis. Great catching up with you, my man. And wow, keep up the great work. You cover the Leafs, you cover CHL, you're all over the place. Enjoy this downtime with your family. Enjoy the time with the family. That's amazing stuff with your son and stuff like that. So thanks for joining us. And, hopefully we'll have you back on during the season.
Yep. Thanks, guys. Cheers.
All right. Cheers. Thanks, Scott. All right, everybody. That was Scott Wheeler, the top-notch analysis. Works for The Athletic. He works for, he works for The Athletic. He covers the Leafs. He covers the OHL. He covers the CHL. He was at Top Prospects game, World Juniors, and my, oh my, great analysis. All right, so we come back. We'll talk about the interview with Scott and break that one down. All right, so you're listening to Trout Talk right here at News Talk Saga 960 AM. Welcome back to Trout Talk right here on Saga 960 AM. Mike Karafilidis along with Brendan Lang. Our other amigo is on assignment. He could not make this episode, and he is a busy man. So he actually, I said it earlier, he sent us a picture of a helicopter, how he's going into a helicopter. So, Zach, hopefully you're going to be okay in that helicopter. I've never been in a helicopter before. Have you?
Me neither. No, and I know I'd be scared. I don't even like flying in planes that much, and I know that a helicopter would not be great for my for me being anxious. Yeah, I'd be nervous in that for sure.
All right, so Scott Wheeler, what a classy guy, right? Classy guy, yeah. First class stand-up dude. And he just gave us all the analysis right there. I mean, top-notch stuff. And let's break that down. I mean, he talked about Ryerson Linders and Luke Misa being, top 2, second, third round guys.
Yeah,
NHL,
I think
upcoming NHL draft. Sorry, Brendan. Yeah.
No, yeah, that fits sort of in what a lot of people have been saying, in that you're going to see them probably second or third round. Luke Misa maybe in that early second round, as he was saying, he kind of likes him there. And remember when we were talking to James Richmond too, and we talked about positional play a little bit there with Scott as well about Luke, but that he's likely going to stay on the wing, or at least scouts are going to start him on the wing. That's sort of been the talk, and James Richmond was talking to us about that. So we'll see where that kind of lies in the draft. And then obviously Ryerson Leanders, who was great in the top prospects game, like he came up with a ton of saves. Scott mentioned it too, like a lot of athletic saves, showing off his cross crease ability, obviously making some also sound positional saves. So he played really well. Obviously, a great showing for him, and we'll see where they land. But yeah, I think that analysis of second, third round is probably pretty safe for both of those guys. And then past that, though, there's so many Steelheads that are available in this draft, and he had talked about a few of those guys as well.
Yeah, I mean, he talked about, and he was really high on Finn Harding, talking about his defensive play and his plus. So I think Finn's like a plus 25 or plus 26 right now, right? And he talked about that, how impressed he was with him. So this should be interesting to see how many Steelheads get drafted in this upcoming NHL draft. But great analysis. Big thanks to Scott Wheeler for coming on. And classy guy, great guy. All right, so let's move on. We talked about the Steelheads weekend. Let's talk about the Steelheads week coming up. It's a tough one. It is a tough one, ladies and gentlemen. They will be Thursday. Well, by the time this is over, it will be North Bay, Sault Ste. Marie on the Friday, and then Sudbury on and that's coming up next. So, man, it's going to be tough. I mean, you got North Bay, who's right there in the standings in the Central Division. Sault Ste. Marie, who loaded up at the trade deadline, and they're right up there in the Western Conference. They're in the top 10 now in the CHL top 10 rankings. And you got the Sudbury Wolves, who are still looking to find themselves, if you ask me, with all the guys that they acquired at the trade deadline. Brendan, it's going to be a tough week.
It really will be, and we can kind of go more in depth about the Sudbury game because that's the one that'll be coming up here right after Trout Talk. But you're right, Sudbury, obviously they really loaded up here for this Eastern Conference that's wide open, and the way that they've started, you've mentioned this as a comparison, or just talking about how the season kind of goes up and down, a comparison a little bit to Peterborough last year, how they loaded up, and at the beginning it was like, are they going to be that good? Are there too many guys there? Like, who knows? And then they found it and completely took off going to the Memorial Cup. So I think that that's a pretty good comparison for Sudbury, where they got so many players and the East is so wide open. Absolutely. I mean, any team could compete in the Eastern Conference. So that's definitely going to be a tough game for Mississauga. They're 2-1 against Sudbury this year. They played them pretty well, but when you just look at the roster, like David Goyette, he's got 70 points on the year. Quentin Musty up there with 60, and they have good defense as well. So, I mean, it's going to be a tough game for sure, but the Steelers have played them pretty well so far this year. So, and obviously it's a little different. Yeah, it's a little bit different, of course. The players, they did play, I think, one game so far after the trade deadline against Sudbury. I may be mistaken on that. Maybe they haven't played.
One game after the trade deadline. That was in right after the trades in Sudbury. That was a 2-1 win for the Steelheads. And that was a big win, big W.
So again, and they've shown that they can win in Sudbury as well. It's going to be a little more difficult because it's that lengthy northern road trip. You mentioned it. North Bay, you're going to have Sault Ste. Marie, who's playing great hockey as well. All three teams are going to be facing, not only is it difficult for the travel, but three difficult teams too. Like it's not like they're going into North Bay, Sault Ste. Marie, or Sudbury and having, a team that's 10th in the Western Conference or something. Like, I mean, all these games are massive games.
Yeah, they're going to need that secondary scoring. They're going to need that secondary scoring to come through again. I'm not sure how long Mason Zabeski's out for, but whatever. But they're going to need, Van Bolsen to come alive again. He had a nice weekend.
He did. Yeah, very good
game against the Brantford Bulldogs. My goodness, what a perfect shot just to save right over the shoulder of Mateo Drobak. Wow. But they're going to need Van Bolsen. They're going to need Carmiris. They're going to need everybody to step up, and they're going to need at least 4 out of 6 points would be nice on this road trip. Would be fantastic to come back with a 6. Last year they've had some success in Sault Ste. Marie. Now that's a team that's really loaded up at the trade deadline. The first and only meeting in Sault Ste. Marie for the Steelheads this season up there. But man, that's a team that's really, really scary up front. But but the North Bay, they gotta beat the North Bay Battalion. I mean, they've been that close so many times, but they gotta get. And you know what, James Richmond said it so many times: 60 minutes. They gotta get off the 60 minutes.
That's right, and that's kind of going to be the key for these games when you're going on the road. And you talk about the bus legs, and sometimes it's tough to get a fast start. But even at home, they've kind of run into that a little bit, where they've had some slow starts and then turned it on as the game went on. So yeah, 60 minutes is going to be huge for all three of these games, as we talked about there. All three of these teams being really good, and a name that you mentioned there with Mason Zabeski with an illness being out, and you talk about secondary scoring. I mean, he's kind of like the face of secondary scoring
Right.
for the Mississauga Steelheads. And we don't know when he's going to be back. And we talked with Scott a little bit there about him. He's in his draft year as well. So it's a guy that they really do miss in Mason Zabeski when he's not in the lineup. It's not just the scoring, but everything that he does, the physicality. He brings a lot of energy every time he goes on the ice. So who knows when he's going to be back, but he definitely is missed for the secondary kind of layer of this team.
You know, and you look at now the acquisition of Dean Locus, how well how it's really working out now. He's getting it now, right, with the Steelheads, and he's really playing well. And I mentioned on the last podcast with Lucas Carmeris, it seemed like those two really have something going, but they're really going to need guys like him. They're going to need Carmeris. They're going to need Van Volson. They're going to need Eggleton. Eggleton had a goal on Sunday too. Like, how nice would it be if William Eggleton gets into scoring again, like he did earlier on in the season when he played with Porter Martone. He played up on the top line. Then he kind of died down a little bit. Now he scored on Sunday. Will it get him going? They're going to need all of this scoring this weekend. These games are huge. These games are absolutely humongous. And this road trip is tough, and it's tough for any team. But, I mean, hey, hot goaltending, Ryerson leaders, if he comes up big, Jack Ivankovic's probably going to get a start in there in between. I expect him probably to get to start against the Sioux. That's my opinion, because it's a back-to-back Thursday and Friday. Mm-hmm. But if they can get the goaltending and some secondary scoring, there's no reason why they can't get 4 to 6 points this weekend.
For sure. And you mentioned some of those names. It would be great if they could. And it's a big momentum booster to be able to beat Brantford as well. And that's a team that's near the top of the Eastern Conference. So you have that kind of good feeling. They played pretty well against Flint. Again, it was just a slow start that kind of put them behind the 8 ball a little bit. But the game against Brantford, you get the win. Huge goaltending performance. Now you have that going in Thursday, Friday, Sunday on this road trip. And you mentioned Eggleton. Even you talk about the fourth line, they played a really good game, especially against Flint. You have Kieran Witkowski out there and Sherrod and McGregor Richmond. They played really well against the Flint Firebirds. So
how about Gabe Sherrod? How about Gabe Sherrod on Sunday?
He's
dropping
playing
the
great.
Gloves. Hey, he wanted to drop the gloves on Friday, but I can't remember who was against.
He did. Yes, that's right.
He didn't want to go.
Yeah,
right?
So he was like, you know what?
Sunday.
I was ready to fight Friday. I got to wait till Sunday, but I could do it anyways. That was good on him.
But you're right, though. The fourth line, right? The fourth line was great. Witkowski, what a pass! I mean, Jack Van Volson for that goal on Friday night against the Flint Firebirds. I mean, they're absolutely great. And McGregor Richmond, those three were just working hard out there, and that's what they need. They need the 4 lines that can just roll one after another, like they were earlier in the season when they started off, I believe, 9-2, right? There's no reason, like I said. So the keys to the game for me, I'll start off Thursday against North Bay. Got to get off the 60 minutes. Got to get off 60 minutes against North Bay. You got to shut down Anthony Romani. Got to shut down Anthony Romani, who has been an absolute Steelheads killer, as far as I'm concerned. And on Friday, man, they're going to need a big goaltending performance on Friday against the Sioux Greyhounds, and just come out hard and forecheck and get the chances and bury them.
That's exactly it. We talk about the forecheck so much. I feel like it's such a big key to the Steelhead success in not only getting on the forecheck and making the defensemen make quick decisions on the breakout of the opposition, but also through the neutral zone and at their own blue line is something that Mississauga's been pretty good at all year long, and not really allowing clean entries into the zone. And with the offensive firepower that all three of these teams have, it's going to be something that's going to be really important, not allowing them to set up in the offensive zone. And I think the defense as a whole has done a pretty good job of that. Don't know if Stevie Leskovar is going to be back in. We'll see. He's dealing with an injury right now. But I think as a whole, they've done a really good job of that all year.
All right, so coming up next, it's going to be the Sudbury Wolves against the Mississauga Steelheads, and that's right after Trout Talk, right here at News Talk Saga 960 AM. So for my partner, Brendan Lang, Zach Bodenstein, who's up in a helicopter somewhere, I'm not sure where, he's on assignment right now. My name is Mike Karafilidis. I'll have the call for you coming up right after Trout Talk. Thanks for listening in, or if you're watching on YouTube, this has been Trout Talk episode 25.